I just was interviewed on the Creator's Adventure podcast hosted by Brian McNulty, and I've got a bunch of takeaways to tell you, a bunch of things that I did well and a bunch of things that I need to do different, or that I need to do at all, that I need to add to my checklist for when I guest speak on a podcast or a show. So, had a ton of fun. I crushed the interview, so that's good. But I'll debrief with you live here on the podcast. So listen in and enjoy.
You know when someone is selling from stage and at the end the audience gets up and rushes to the back of the room to buy? That's a table rush. My name is Misha Z, and the Table Rush Talk Show is all about bringing you the tools, strategies, and tactics that you can use to grow your audience and inspire them to buy.
Yeah, so I crushed the Creator's Adventure interview with Brian McNulty. And man, I had all my stories roll in. So I was doing that really good. I was telling my stories very well from my story arcs, my 4 story arcs. There's 4 story arcs in my life. There's my recovery story arc of how I see life and business through the lens of recovery, because I've been in that my whole life. There is the arc of my success years when I was killing it as a salesman, living in San Francisco and then San Diego, being married, raising kids, and just nothing but success. And then there's the arc of, divorce, career failure, more failed relations, death, all these things and all lessons learned from there. And then there's the final story arc number 4 of rebirth, moving into digital marketing and my influence army, the creation of the influence army. And within that, I was telling my stories great. I was telling the inspirational stories great. I have 3 main groups of stories you should be telling. Your personal stories, then your inspirational stories, so the people in your life who inspire you, whether that's a literal mentor, a book you've read, or you're walking down the street and you cross paths with somebody and they say something that changes the course of your life. And then there's your customer success stories. And depending on the arc of your life that you're talking about, it can be literal customers that have had success with you, or it could be aunts, uncles, friends, or schoolmates, or associates, or friends, or passerbys, anybody that has had that you've positively influenced financially, emotionally, whatever. You get what I'm talking about. So I was doing really good telling those stories. I did need to tell more customer success stories. I was talking a lot about my successes, which he was asking me about, but I definitely could have framed it to, customers that were having success. So that's one thing I definitely could have been doing better. So I was telling lots of great stories. I was telling them at the right time, and that was working awesome. I just could have told some more customer success stories. The other thing is, one of the things I teach to my members is, hey, we need to be teaching frameworks and speaking in frameworks, and people who want to buy from us, they learn better from us and are more inspired to buy from us, and we teach better and we inspire them better when we speak and teach with frameworks. So whether that's overtly, or I speak direct to a framework, step 1, 2, 3, or 4, or Indirectly, I speak to frameworks, and I don't point out the steps, but I just, speak about the process and what happened. And you see speakers who do both of those things. Some speakers are amazing at speaking indirectly to frameworks. They're hidden, they're in there, you can see them. If you look hard, like I think about Ed Milet, is one guy who I saw of late who just, man, he is such an inspirational speaker, but his frameworks are hidden. You gotta consciously try and pull them out. And then of course there's Russell Brunson, who actively talks about his frameworks and points to his frameworks, and is constantly teaching frameworks, coming up with new frameworks. But he's also gifted at the indirect framework as well. But I just told you about my story arc, my story bank framework. Get your stories straight, have your stories together, start listing your stories. And so I've got all these frameworks that I was speaking to and about, and he asked me direct questions about some of my frameworks, and I didn't have them in front of me. And I was like, oopsie daisy. I've created a lot of frameworks of late, lots of new frameworks, and so I don't have them all memorized per se, right, where I can just spout out the framework and the positive things it does for you, and then the exact steps on it. Anyway, it was very funny. I did fine, but noted, have my frameworks ready to go, open and ready to go, so I can speak to them. But yeah, the frameworks that I've been teaching the longest, I spoke to them great, like my story bank framework. The newer ones, not so good. Anyway, yes, I meant to practice the intro with the host. And it's very interesting. You can feel pressure when a podcast interview is starting. And I can feel pressure, and I'll feel like, I don't want to show weakness, or it would be very vulnerable to say, hey, Mr. Show Host, in this case, Brian, hey, Brian, let's practice the intro, or here's the intro I want to use. I had emailed him an intro. I assumed he had it, and I assumed he was going to use it. But guess what? He didn't have it. Well, he didn't have it in front of him. He didn't see it, or his assistant didn't give it to him. And he had cobbled together his own, which he did a fine job. I say this out of love, so I'm not poo-pooing Brian. I think as a podcast host and as entrepreneurs, man, we get very busy. So anything that I can do to help as a guest speaker on a podcast or a guest speaker anywhere, I should help. And so on the checklist, I need to add practice the intro with the host. And I crafted this incredible intro. I have a framework for it. It's your short bio guest speaking framework. Something like that. See, I don't have the framework in front of me, but it's really cool. It's a 3-step framework, 3 basic sentences, and it really just shines a light on who you are, how you can help, and then it's got a compelling hook to engage the audience. It's very cool. But yeah, so I need to add to the list, practice the intro with the host. Even though I feel like vulnerable, it will be very valuable for both of us and well worth it. So I'm going to do that. Also add to the list, ask for the raw content. Ask for the raw content. Because if I can get the raw recordings, then it gives me a lot of flexibility to not have to make new content. I can use the content that we just created. So I need to make that note. We did do back-to-back interviews, so I interviewed him first. It went great. And then he interviewed me. So realistically, what I'll do is I will send him the raw content for his use, and at that point, I'll ask for the raw recordings from him. And then lastly, from my notes, from my debriefing notes, there might be more, but I feel like this is pretty good. I think it's so important to debrief on the things that we do, the projects that we create and execute on. I've been teaching a lot of classes to my influence army, and I've never really taught like this before. It's all new to me. So yeah, I have my membership, the Influence Army membership. I'm teaching all the time, all these frameworks. I've created 10 frameworks to help you guest speak on podcasts, on shows, and they're awesome, and people are loving it, and I'm helping them have wins. But I need to debrief after I teach and write down what I did good, what I didn't do good, takeaways that I have. Whenever you do something like that, or I do something like that, in the heat of it, I'll be thinking like, oops, should have done that, or oops, shouldn't have said that, or oops, or this went well, or this is what people responded to, or perhaps the class, I'll think, oh, I need to add this, or take this out, or things like that. And so it's so valuable to debrief and take those notes and make those changes, so you're not constantly thinking that each time you teach a class, right? And here's a little side note on the class that I taught today. I did a very good job of, I can't remember what it's called, but you future pace. I think that might be what it's called, but there's future pace. There's another term out there as well, but in effect, you're saying, hey, can you see how this works? Can you see how powerful this is? Can you see how this will help you? Imagine how you'll be different after you implement this. Is this making sense? These are all kinds of things to get the person engaged, to get the people engaged, and get them and encourage them to take action. So I did a good job of that. I'm not sure if I said this, but I'll say it again. The last thing I did very well was I asked for referrals. So I asked for podcast referrals. At the very end, I said, hey, are there any podcasts that you think I would be a good fit for? Or do you know any podcast hosts that you could introduce me to? And he said, yes, indeed, I do. He spit one off. I believe I wrote it down. But he said he would do an email introduction. And then as well, he asked me, hey, do you know anybody that I'd be a good guest speaker for? And I said, indeed, I do. I've got a couple. I will do some invites for you, or some introductions for you. And so I thought that was a very good thing to do. Oh, yes, and then lastly, I planted the seed of, hey, I'd love to teach to your audience, or to your class, to your members, or what have you. And he said, oh yeah, we do a monthly live training, and it's kind of booked up for the rest of the year, but I'd love to have you on for a live training, to teach a live training to his community, maybe next year. And next year's coming quick, so there you have it. It reminds me, I need to find in my notes where I wrote that little bit down about the trainings, so I can refer to them. But yeah, anyway, there you go. Interview went great. I had a ton of fun. I crushed it. Oh my gosh, I'm good at the interview, at being interviewed. I just had that feeling, that knowing deep down. I was like, oh yeah, I'm made for this. I'm crushing it. Like, he was extremely happy. Brian McNulty. He just was super stoked. So win-win for everybody. There you go. I'll let you know when the interview comes out. And yeah, start putting your voice out there. If you want to learn how to start going on some podcasts, download my guesting guide at guestingguide.com. Super easy. Download guestingguide.com and it answers the top 10 questions and gives you some templates to send emails from, email invites from. It gives you, how to find endless podcasts, what to say, when to say it, all these fun things. So download theguestingguide.com. Love to all. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.